Welcome. We're so excited to have you here and for this very special session for the beginning of our series, which we're calling Data Horizons, where we're going to be taking a deep dive into analytics and AI into multiple industries. And so today we are joined by three amazing panelists. And this, I have to say, is quite a treat for me because I'm a bit biased because I had the opportunity to work on Alan and Robert and Natalia's team, and they were so foundational in shaping my career and helping me become the analyst, analytics engineer, data scientist, and all the things that I am today. So it's a pleasure to have them here and to dive into the great work that they're doing at VSP Vision. If this is your first Women in Data event, I'm just happy to share a little bit more about who Women in Data is. So we are a diverse community of data leaders, data citizens, practitioners, but always data learners. And our whole mission is to increase diversity in data careers. And so we have a community of roughly 50,000 people and representation in 60 plus countries and chapters in over 60 cities. We're so happy to have you in a webinar that allows us to connect globally, but also hope that you have the opportunity to connect with one of our local chapters as well. If this is your first event, we encourage you to stay connected with us and to get involved. One of the things that I always say within the women data community is all are welcome. We're very keen on sharing our knowledge and cheering each other on. But most importantly, holding each other accountable too. As you know, if you're new to this space, there's a lot to learn. If you've been in the space for a while, we need accountability to be making those right decisions with data. But most importantly, we want to lead and create other opportunities for others to lead. So I encourage you to stay connected with us, get involved, whether that be through our many classes, jobs board. We'll talk a little bit about some opportunities that we have there as well, or continue learning with the webinars and the chapters, many opportunities to get involved. So hopefully this is not your first session. And if you're a member of Women Data, welcome back. We're so happy to have you here again today. So I'm happy to kick things off today for our session on analytics and AI in the healthcare industry and to announce really the stars of this show who are going to be sharing their insights with us. First off, we have Robert Cathy. Robert is the VP of Global Analytics Solutions and the Chief Data Officer of VSP Vision. In addition, we have Natalia Torpino, Data Operations Senior Manager for VSP Vision, and Alan Cordell, Senior Director, Chief Analytics Officer for VSP Vision. Welcome, Alan, Natalia, and Robert.
Thank you.
Awesome. So as we get kicked off here today, I wanted to just start by having each of you share a little bit more about yourself. So Robert, would you go ahead and kick us off?
Sure. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the discussion here. I've been with VSP now for 21 years. I had a variety of different roles over that time. Prior to VSP, I worked for a company called EDS, Electronic Data Systems, and we did business process and IT outsourcing, and I had a variety of leadership roles there. So excited to be here. On a personal note, one of my passions is running. I enjoy running and lead a local running chapter here. So a little bit about me.
Thank you, Natalia.
Thank you, Sadie. Thank you for having me too. I'm Natalia Torquino. I've been with VSP for 20 years already. I started back then as an RPG developer. So most of you may not know what RPG is because it's very old. So, but that's how I started. So right now I'm part of Robert's and Alan's team, and I'm in charge. I'm part of the data operations team, in charge specifically of the supply chain pillar analytics.
Thank you. Alan?
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here today. So I'm Alan Cordell, and I've also been with the VSP companies for about the same time as Robert and Natalia. There are a number of us who've been here for a while and have been able to build careers here. I started out in Ifinity, which is the division that develops software that runs in the eye care practices. And then I worked in or done project across all the different companies that we'll talk about in a moment here. Before I got into analytics and data science, I actually was in the advertising world. And I bring that up because so much of that work was actually data analysis, but also strategic business planning and being really focused on being clear about what you're trying to do and what you're trying to change, which is a lot of what we focus on. We'll talk about that in a bit. And then for fun, I just like to escape to the wilderness, go try to hike to the top of a mountain, get to the top, look back and be surprised at what you can accomplish if you just don't think and put one foot in front of the other.
I love it. Okay, so a couple things I hear from all of your stories is there's a long tenure at VSP, right? So once you join VSP, I typically tend to stay at VSP, and I'll say VSP was the longest job I ever had in my life, right? So for me, that tenure lasted a very long time as well. Robert, can you tell us a little bit, like, what's that secret sauce of VSP that keeps people there? Like, what is their position, and is it what they're doing in the healthcare industry? What is this thing that once you join VSP, this is a place you can stay and grow?
That's a great question. I think the culture at VSP is what makes people stay. I remember when I was applying for a job and I'm sitting in the lobby and people are this is back in the days when people were on site. So I'm sitting in the lobby and people are walking in, waving. It was like I was at Disneyland and people are just super nice. I always say VSP reminds me of the It's a Small World ride at Disneyland. Just very welcoming culture. And the other thing about VSP is that it's a not-for-profit organization, right? So we were founded in 1955 by a group of optometrists, and their mission was to provide affordable, high-quality eye care. So that's how VSP started. And so we don't have any shareholders, so we don't have to be driven by quarterly earnings. We can do the long-term strategy approach. So that's one of the really good things about VSP. And then the fact that we are very much mission-driven, helping people see, and in the charitable work that we do through our Mobilize program, those are the types of things that make me proud to work for VSP. Our values include the statements like we care, we empower diversity. Those things are true and things that I've experienced in my time at VSP.
Ty, can you elaborate a little bit more on what Robert was touching on, which is really just the mission of VSP? And then how does that get carried out? I know Alan had mentioned VSP has multiple lines of business.
Yeah.
What are those lines of business as well?
So the mission that Robert just mentioned is that we want to empower human potential through sight. So we have different lines of business, whether helping people access quality care, supporting eye care providers in managing their practices, or partnering with local organizations to aid our communities. We, VSP Vision, portfolio brands get health at the center of everything we do. So we have different lines of business. We're not only healthcare. We have 7 different lines of business. I can go real quick and tell you a little bit about each one. So VSP Vision Care, that's the healthcare, that's the vision insurance company. They provide access to members access to quality, affordable eye care through thousands of network providers. We are a nonprofit company. We invest in our profit back into the communities we serve. Right now, we have more than 4,000 doctors, 41,000 doctors, sorry, more than 85 million members, and more than 60,000 clients. Another line of business is VisionWorks. VisionWorks is an intersection between healthcare and retail and provides a national network of optometrists, clinical specialists, retail experts on high-quality eyewear products through more than 700 retail locations throughout the U.S. Another line of business is VSP Optics. The VSP Optics companies are the companies that manufacture and distribute lenses. We also have another line of business for eyewear. The eyewear companies are Marchon, Altera, and Allure. And what they do is to manufacture and distribute eyewear and somewhere, specifically the frames for the lenses. Another one is Iconic. Iconic is our e-commerce line of business that provides the customer with that online experience. We also have another line of business called Affinity. Is the one that produces the software. That's the software that the doctors use to place the orders and to look at the catalogs. And lastly, we have a new line of business called VSP Ventures. VSP Ventures are practice that are owned and operated by VSP, but still providing doctors with the choice of how they practice optometry, while ensuring that members continue to have access to the preferred eye care setting. So as you see, our companies are very diverse, but they were all together to provide the best vision health options to help people stay healthy and stay healthy.
So while you're telling me this, I just have data pinging in my head, right? I'm like, okay, you must have so much amazing cool data, right? So 85 million members, 40,000 doctors, that's just on the vision insurance side, let alone the retail side where you have information on transactions and people coming into stores and what they're purchasing. And then almost like a fashion side with how frames are made, but also a supply chain side with a lab. But then also you have software data. So one, you must have the most interesting data. Alan, can you tell us a little bit more about what are you doing with all of this data and what are some of the problems you're working on at VSP?
Sure. Yeah. And I got to give a shout out to Sadie, because when Sadie was here at VSP working with us, this is when we really started to launch some of these initiatives and advancing our strategic use of data and leveraging data science. And so Sadie had a hand in some of these, but we also acquire data externally from third parties. So we do, a lot of people that come to work at VSP, or when we start to describe it, they are surprised by how much data we have. We also have done a lot of work to make sure that that data is able to be used. So, we had studied why do data scientists tend to leave a company, and it's often because they can't do what they're capable of because they can't get to the data. So although that's not the exciting part, we put a lot of focus on that, making sure that we are curating the data, and I'll come back to what we're doing on that later. But in terms of how do we use the data strategically, it's across all of our different business units that Natalia described. So from an enterprise standpoint, we have a customer data platform where we develop profiles so that we understand who our members and customers are and prospects. And that is, demographic descriptions of individuals, but it's also, we run predictions to figure out who's likely to go out of network from an insurance standpoint, who's likely to drop their benefits, who's likely to schedule an exam in the next 60 days, which will trigger different marketing campaigns and efforts to make sure that we are enabling a positive patient experience and giving them the services and products that they want to have. And so from an insurance standpoint, that's some of the work that we're doing. But then that positive experience has a lot to do with, do we have the right eye care locations and the type of locations? So you can have a more medical experience or a little more of a fashion retail experience. So we also run algorithms to predict where we should have certain types of locations in alignment with where our members and prospects are, and make sure that we're always refining that, and also making sure we're assisting members in finding the right location for them. And then Natalia talked about our frame business and our laboratory business as well. So we are using the data also to anticipate whether we are designing the right styles and whether we have the right brands. So a lot of the frames that like for what Robert and I are wearing and the frames that VSP sells are licensed under different well-known companies you may know. For example, Nike is one of them. But we're always looking at, do we have the right mix of brands and the right styles to meet what patients' expectations are? And then I'll come back to a project that we just recently have been launching, where our laboratory business, so they basically cut the lenses, assemble the frames and lenses together. And they had been stuck in very much a reporting culture. So everything very ad hoc, couldn't get to the data they needed. So we've been migrating all of their data into a new cloud platform, enabling some new forms of analytics, putting in real-time streaming data. And where we're at on that is essentially their executives have oversight. They have business performance monitoring that is active up to the moment they need it. The people working in the labs can have data in real time, so they can monitor what's happening to optimize performance. Their analysts can do simple no-code drag and drop to understand patterns that may show up on those dashboards, answer questions our executives may have, which has been challenging in the past. So things that used to take a week are now 10 minutes. And then we also use that same stream to run predictions. So predict when is a job likely to make its way back to a practice. But even more importantly, predict which combinations of frames, lenses, and prescriptions might result in the lens breaking. So the lab doesn't spend time and cost creating those and they can intervene. So that's just a good example of where we're trying to do the full spectrum of AI and analytics to help an entire business run more efficiently and effectively.
You guys seem like you have a lot of work on your plate. I mean, not only focused on one line of business, but multiple lines of business, which you can touch, which is incredible. Alan, I know your role is more on the analytics and AI side, but Robert, your role is on the data side as the chief data officer. Can you share, do these solutions differ? Maybe also another question for people, like what's the difference between a chief data officer and a chief analytics officer? How do they work together? I don't know if you guys have different opinions on this, but can you highlight maybe how some of the teams work differently, but also together as well?
Yeah, I'll start. And of course, I'll appreciate Alan's comments. So I'm responsible for both things, the enterprise analytics and the data. And so our team is structured in a way where we've recently restructured to maximize focus and frankly, the strength of our leadership team. So we have three main focus areas. One's around data management, and that's where we have data governance, policies, and programs. That's where we have a leader over that area who's responsible for our analytics platforms and tools. And then on the operations side, that's the site that Natalia sits on. We have a director responsible for execution. And that's about making sure that we are delivering to the expectations of our business partners. And Alan's role as chief analytics officer is really around strategy and enablement. And so our ultimate goal as an organization is to empower the rest of the organization with analytics capabilities. So Alan has the big task of helping to elevate the analytics capabilities across the organization. So we actually have what we're calling, and this is a Gartner term as well, analytics franchise model. So our team serves as the corporate hub, if you will. And then we have reporting and analytics teams out in business who do a variety of reporting and analytics with a variety of skills, with a variety of tools, a variety of data sources and practices. And what we're trying to do with this franchise model is to create alignment across the different teams while still giving them the autonomy to serve their business areas the way that they need to. So that's just a kind of an overview of how the organization is structured.
Mitai, can you share a little bit more about what these roles end up looking like on the team? So we've heard from the problems that are worked on kind of at a high level, but let's say I want to join this team. What type of roles are there? What type of skills do I need to have?
Yeah. So as Robert mentioned, right, there are the three main areas. We have the data management, the data operations and execution, and then we have Owen with analytic strategy and enablement. So, but in general, our team is a mix of data engineers, data scientists, data architects, data analysts, data modelers, and business intelligence developers. And we are, I have to mention that right now, since we are almost 100% remote, we have a distributed workforce, and we have people working all over the US. So if we ever want to go back to the office, we won't be able to because our workforce it's so distributed that that's not going to be possible. So we have the data engineers, the data analysts, and the BI developers. We divided them and we group them into dedicated Scrum teams. So we have 4 Scrum teams. And I would like to mention also that right now we have, for us, we said before, we have 4 openings in the team. And I think we're going to share those openings later, but I'm going to mention them. We are looking for a principal data modeler, a senior data modeler, senior data analyst, and a business intelligence developer. So those are the openings we have right now.
So in terms of the roles, I mean, it sounds like the world is your oyster at VSP, right? The data you have, you can be a data scientist, an analyst, an engineer, an architect, all with data being in front of those things, right? Um, and this is kind of open for whoever, what skills or even more so mindset would you say makes someone successful in this role? And particularly in the healthcare industry, because one of the things that kept coming back is how mission driven VSP Vision is. Being a not for profit, as Robert started off and mentioned, we don't have shareholders to answer to say, hey, we got to hit this bottom line. It's really about the people, the members, the doctors. So that is such a different experience from, I would say, most of corporate America, where it's like, it's all about the bottom line, which is refreshing. But as someone working in the field of data and analytics and AI, what's that mindset and skill set that I need to come into VSP with to be successful?
Yeah, I can take that. So I think obviously the technical skills, those are pretty standard. What you could expect for any of those roles, what's required, right? But what really sets people apart is being inquisitive, having business acumen. The reason I mentioned, for example, at the beginning, I started my career more in business strategy and advertising is what really helps is if you can really get at what the need truly is. And one thing I would advocate for everyone to do is don't lose sight of the fact that you have a lot of knowledge that most people in business teams that you're supporting don't have. And so helping to educate them and inform them and helping them see what's possible is huge because they can't I think culturally, there used to be this pattern of business teams would send over a requirements document for a technology team to build off of. And what you lose is, was that really what was needed or is it what was possible? So the whole art of the possible is huge. And, we're taking this approach where we actually go in and work with the different leaders and staff to understand what their business objectives are, look at their business plans, and then create an analytics strategy that supports that. And that really gets you to doing the work that matters and makes a difference. And then the other thing I would say is, and this is probably true in all companies, but especially in a company where BSP has been around for, I think it's approaching 7 decades. And we do have a lot of people who've been in the company a long time, and there are a lot of positives about that. A risk is you get a sense of people believing truths about the company or how it works or what's possible. So sometimes in data science, especially, we take the approach of operating like mythbusters. So we need to leverage the data to help really understand if the business operates exactly as people think it does and find other options, do scenario planning. And so I think inquisitiveness, having business acumen, and also being comfortable and aware of the fact that you have a skill set that the people you support don't have, and they need you to help them know what can be done to enable the work that they're doing.
I always wanted to add to what Alan said, and I want to stress on uh, uh, skills, in my opinion, are very important, are adaptability and learning agility. So BSP as a company, we are always changing. We're always like reacting to factors outside of our control, right? So we have to respond quickly to company, industry, regulatory, market, or economic developments. So for example, right now, we're working in two efforts that we weren't planned and be working on, right? So we are working, to give you an example, on a U.S. bank acquisition of Union Bank. So we pay and we get paid through banks. So we have to make sure that we're ready for that transition. Another effort that the company as a whole is working on is on a mitigation plan for a possible UPS strike. Our supply chain depends so much heavily on UPS. And we have to make sure that we're ready if that happens, right? So those are examples on how adaptability is so important.
And the only thing I would add to that is humility is super important as well. So that when we engage with our business partners, we're seeking to understand and meeting them where they're at, and then applying those things that Alan described, right? So that we don't go in with judgment. We go in, again, seeking to understand.
That we're getting some really good questions coming in. So I'm going to switch to the audience questions. Latoya asks, how do you ensure the data team has access to the data they need without conflicts between business lines, IT, and security concerns? I love this question, Latoya. I feel like you've lived in the trenches to ask this question. So I'll open this up to whoever wants to answer this.
I'll start by saying it's, I don't know that I describe it as conflict all the time, but it's next to impossible to do that without some interaction, especially with OIS, with the Office of Information Security. So that's definitely something that we work through, and we're continuing to work through to make sure that we're protecting the data in the right way, and that we're protecting the privacy of our members and of consumers. And so, Alan, I know you were about to say something, so I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, so I alluded to this earlier. So we are in the process of migrating all of our operations to a cloud-based platform. So we had our, as a healthcare company, we had for a long time kept all of our data on premise, and we're at a point where our security partners have been able to support us in having a secure environment where that's in the cloud. That opens up a lot of opportunities, and we're taking that opportunity to redesign how we all work together. So that when I talked about the work with the laboratories, the way we approach access to the data is we start by really defining the core data subjects that we have in the organization and getting all the right participants to really curate that data. We've always said we wanted to do that, but we were never great at it. And we're actually doing it pretty effectively now. And then also treating all of the data models that are designed as making sure they're business oriented. So there again can be a pattern where it's more of an IT function to create a data model, and it doesn't really support what the needs are. And this goes back to when I was mentioning, we go in and we look at the business plan and we come up with an analytics strategy. So rather than being a reporting culture where a business is constantly sending in requests for a report, it's all very ad hoc. We kind of know what the work and what the needs are over the next several months, so we can design our data models to support a range of things. And then working with the business teams, they have the ability to adapt those on their own. And also there's less of a need to go back to an IT team to get what they need. So it's much more enabling. I think as the tools continue to evolve, the analytics tools, some of the data science tools where it requires less coding, it's more low code, no code, that also opens up a lot of potential. We've seen an example where someone who didn't have the deepest analyst skills was enabled with one of those platforms, and that person is doing amazing work and is very driven. And we can tell it's because they're being empowered to do things and create more value and be appreciated in ways they wouldn't have been without that. So I think that's a lot of it, as well as really opening up opportunities, but it comes back to having a solid foundation and strategy for the architecture.
Love it. That opens up the perfect gateway to the next question, which is from Sylvie. She's asking, what is the best programming language or software to use when it comes to data in healthcare? So I know, Alan, you mentioned some low code, no code tools. There are other languages or tools that anybody shares is good to learn.
Yeah, so I think that depends on, obviously, if you need to know SQL, the tools are starting to allow people who don't even know SQL to do some work, but it's always valuable to know what those tools are actually doing under the hood. SQL, Python, it depends if you're in more of an analyst role or over in the data science. So we kind of have this spectrum of analytics and dashboarding, visualization. So it's not coding, but understanding visualization techniques and knowing when to use the right visualization is really important. But whether it's SQL, Python, predominantly those are the things we're using. And then in terms of other things like TensorFlow, different libraries, We tend to use the Nine platform, but then our data scientists are doing a lot of their own coding within that and leveraging Jupyter notebooks as well. So it's not so much that we have a fixed way that we need people to work. It really does come back to, can you work within the environment with the skills that you have? And then I guess the other thing related to that is we view it as it takes a village. So we also have data engineers who support the analytics and the data science teams to create the pipelines and do the deployment. So we don't expect someone developing the algorithms to do all of the work. We kind of break it up. So it depends on the skills of the people that we bring in.
Perfect. I'm going to ask another question here from the audience, which is, how did you go about implementing your data management policies? Did you take a centralized approach? Also, how difficult was it to identify data owners, considering you have so many different areas? I think this is a great question for multiple reasons. Robert, is this something you want to tackle?
Yeah, there's a lot to that. I mean, what we're doing is really shifting the culture, right? And we started down a journey of data stewardship over a decade ago. And through various iterations, we've formed a much better data governance program, but we still have a ways to go. I mean, we're not where we need to be, because people have been at the company a long time and they're used to doing things a certain way and not necessarily as data driven, frankly, right? And so data stewardship is one of those things, and data governance is one of those things that is critical in terms of a foundation of trust in the data. But people don't often, especially in the business, really want to get into that. They're not interested in that. So part of our challenge has been trying to help people understand why the business should own the data and help us define how we model it. And that's been an ongoing challenge. And part of our modernization program that we're doing right now, a big component of that is change management and implementing a data literacy program, as you and I have talked about, Sadie. So it's been a big challenge. So I'll just leave it at that. I mean, it's been a big challenge for us.
Only not them, what has helped us get in a little bit closer to that is we implementing product owners within the business. So as Robert said, we're making the business being the owner of the data. And those product owners are kind of working directly with us. So, and they're kind of the filter between the business and us. So we are not the ones who have to stop them, from and making them follow rules. So I think that the implementation of that, working with product owners has helped us a lot.
One of the other things I forgot to mention is that we are also implementing a data catalog tool that's going to be super critical for us to be. And one of our guiding principles as we modernize into the new platform is that the data catalog has to be updated, right? In the past, we get to that later, and sometimes later doesn't come up, right? So we're approaching it with, we must have the data catalog updated before we release the data into production.
I love that. I think that's something that so many people can relate to, just in documentation in general, right? Documentation is, okay, I did the thing and then I'll go back and write what I did. And what they say, tomorrow never comes, right? If we're going to do that tomorrow, it's something that never comes. So I love the idea of making sure that's released as part of the production release as well. Okay, Alan, you guessed that there was going to be a question on generative AI. And so prior to the session, we're like, I bet there's going to be a question on generative AI. The question is, do you have any plans to incorporate the use of generative AI into the business?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying we're actually very careful internally about when we use the acronym AI. And it's because I don't know how many of you, your families or friends, don't really understand what you do, but all of a sudden they're seeing a lot of things in the media about AI and how it's going to end humanity and everything else. And suddenly they say, "Oh, is that what you work on?" And it's not, right? But not that kind. And so, but the way we view it is that's what our different business leaders are also seeing. So we're being very careful to describe the work more in context of what it is. So we talk probably more often about data science and machine learning. But I'll come back to generative AI. So for us, it's still early days for that. There is a lot of hype going on. We are starting to step into it a little bit with conversational AI. So our team is really tangentially involved. Our enterprise architecture team is really starting with this in our call centers to be able to automate a lot of the interactions with different members and constituent groups. But our plan is where that really will start to shine is when we link that into all of the data that we are also managing, the predictions that we run, so it can leverage all of that intel as part of how it responds. So we think there's a lot of opportunity to improve experiences. We also think there's a lot of opportunity in terms of finding patterns. While we're not medical, there are some applications where we think some of this work can help improve the patient experience, even detect potential medical risks that someone may not otherwise know about. So we think there's a lot of opportunity here, but I think really a lot of the core focus right now is still on what we would describe as analytics and some of the foundations of data science, while this space gets figured out a little bit more. And then the other thing about that I'll just say is, we have some policies where we can't use some of those services right now in terms of putting our own data into it. Uh, right. And so we're being cautious about its use and really experimenting with it and figuring out where it makes sense and where it doesn't. And a lot of these new features, really, it depends on what data it's leveraging to drive its outcomes. And I think that will definitely be where we focus is what are we asking it to do and how are we enabling it to do that? And all of our work is guided and we have boundaries set by our legal and privacy teams on everything we do. So they'll definitely be involved in helping us sort that out too.
You guys keep leading to the perfect setup of these next questions. I love the audience interaction questions that are coming in and what everyone is saying on this panel. Because talking about what's going into the models is very key, as I think everyone in this audience knows that if you have junk going in, you can't do any type of math over it and you're going to get junk coming out. So there's a question here about how do you ensure data quality is good enough for modeling and how do you attain better quality? And I think that also then kind of goes in. There was a follow-up question to Robert on your data catalog. If you're comfortable sharing kind of what tool you plan on using and any recommendations there. So data quality, how do we get better data quality and ensure we have good data quality? And then what are we using for data catalogs?
So since Alan has responsibility for the data modeling, I'll let him speak to what we're doing there in terms of the quality.
Yeah, it's really, I sometimes get tired of the overuse of the word democratization, but it's really empowering, reimagining what data modeling really means. So when someone takes 6 Excel files that they retrieved from different people around the company and they don't know how those were retrieved, what logic was used to filter, right? But they bring them into Excel and they do VLOOKUPs. That, in essence, is a data model. And so what we're trying to help people see is they're doing data modeling today, but we can empower them to do it the right way and use tools that create powerful, reusable, and automated models sitting over top of automated data. And so to do that, though, it still goes back to, so if you think about our business, the core data subjects, I won't name them all, but it's claims, lab orders, practices, members. Those are just a few. So there are groups within the business and technical teams that are responsible for the applications that create that data. And so they're the ones that are helping us curate those data subjects, those base level data models. And then once we're confident in those and those teams actively managing them over time, then we can build a layer of more business oriented data models over top of those. And so that's how we get the integrity and the quality, because we have a team that's accountable to it, which isn't necessarily the team that is making use of the data for analytics and other purposes. So it requires both layers and both sets of ownership to get it done right.
Perfect. And then we have some clarification too on the catalog question, asking about if the catalog enables data quality capabilities or if there's another tool that is used. So are you using are you doing any data observability, data explainability, or is it purely like the catalog is that first starting point to enable that better data quality?
So we are implementing Oval Edge. It's a relatively new data catalog tool. It does have a data quality module as well. So we are in the process of doing that. And we're focusing primarily on that lab area first that Alan talked about, the lab optimization work that we're doing. So we're taking a phased approach in terms of implementing that tool as we implement the use cases that we build out in the new analytics platform.
This is a great question here. Pruva's asking, is someone who has really strong analytics skills, but has never worked in the healthcare industry. Are there any recommendations? When do you take people who don't have the industry experience, but the strong technical skills? And then any recommendations of how do you get that healthcare experience as well?
I think for our organization, again, while Vision Care is our healthcare arm, we're vertically integrated across multiple industries. So just having healthcare, that's not a requirement per se, right? The analytics skills are important as well as the people skills and even leadership skills as individuals or as leaders. Those are what are really important. You can learn the business, right? So,
Yeah, I'll
Go ahead, Alan.
sorry. Oh, go ahead, Natalia.
So no, in my just quickly in my experience, my team, right? I have hired people with not healthcare experience, and I think that as Robert said, what comes in, what is more important is that learning agility. That they're willing to learn and to because as I said, even if you, as Robert said, it's even if you know healthcare, we have wholesale, we have software, we have all kind of industries. So it's always going to be something to learn. So it's not, it's always going to be something new. So we don't pay too much attention to that. So if you're an expert now in healthcare.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, I think what we really value is diversity of perspective, diversity of thought. And in this context, people who've come from different industries may add a perspective to the work we do that's extremely valuable. And it's much easier to learn healthcare and healthcare data than it is to learn some of those other skills that we've been talking about. Like the question earlier about which languages. There's an alphabet soup of languages out there, right? And so I would say it's more, do you have an understanding of data structures and how to leverage a language to work with data? And then, have some of those languages that you can apply. That's all more important. Doing the type of work we do and coming up with the concepts. I think you could come from a lot of different industries and then just figure out how to apply that thinking to healthcare.
I want to follow up on one of the a second part of a previous question, which was about training. So correct me if I'm wrong, policies have changed, but VSP was the one who sponsored a large portion of my master's program. And something that I remember directly about VSP was how much training opportunities there were. I just listened to a podcast by Nancy Duarte, which if anyone is looking to improve their presentation skills, go check out Nancy Duarte's work. But I got introduced to Nancy Duarte through a workshop at VSP. I also loved, Denny and I have both read the Speed of Trust book, which is something that training that I did at VSP. So can one of you talk a little bit more about kind of the training opportunities that VSP offers? Because that was also part of Apruva's question as well.
I'll start. We have, like you said, Sadie, there's a number of training opportunities that our HR department provides around different business skills, leadership skills. We have an education reimbursement program. So people who are trying to get their advanced degree, or in some cases, a bachelor's degree, can get some reimbursement for their education. And then in our area, we provide training as needed. We also send people to conferences and sometimes, well, back in the day, we would even bring training on site. That kind of thing we would do more virtually now. But we have a really good HR department with respect to learning and development. So there's a lot of courses that people can take, which is another thing that I think helps people stay at VSP for a long time. You really do have the opportunity to reinvent yourself at this company because we're so vast in terms of the types of businesses that we support, right? Uh, so it's a great learning culture. That's just part of the culture.
And I wanted to add also, VSP is great at finding your potential and helping you grow. So it stresses on your career development at all, a lot. So it's just VSP is, as I said, we as the IT department, we call it GTS. Even if you are within that department, we're so big and you can move so many places within it. And VSP will help you doing that.
Okay. Did you want to say something, Alan?
I'm hoping we can hit that last question that
I
came.
was just going to
Great
say
one.
that's Jasmine is asking a fire question here that I love coming in. And as we're kind of wrapping up, I think this would be a great way to kind of have everyone go around the bend. So Jasmine asked, can you think of a mistake you made during the early stage of your career that made you grow? And what did you learn from this mistake? Thank you, Jasmine, for this question. I'd love it if everyone answered this. I'll even answer this question too.
Yeah, I'll take it first. I've made a lot of mistakes, so it's hard to pick just one. But one that's big is not appreciating the challenge of change management, and also not realizing that to be successful in that, you have to put yourself out there. And what I was saying earlier on is kind of know your own story and know what makes you uniquely you and what your strengths are, and then leverage those to help in that aspect. So what I was saying is everyone that you interact with doesn't know what you know. So sometimes you're talking to them and you think they're with you and they actually are just trying to be nice, or they don't want to acknowledge they don't know what you're saying, or aren't really getting it. And just breaking it down and being very genuine, and making sure everyone's clear that you're trying to enable, but doing that from your own authentic voice, I think is what makes a difference.
So I can go
Okay.
next. Mine is very specific. It was a mistake that I almost made. So back in the beginning of my career, as I mentioned before, I was a programmer. So I was a developer. I started with RPG, then I moved into, I specialized in SAP. So I learned their language ABAP. So I was an ABAP programmer. And we were implementing SAP in the company, and the data warehouse analytics consultant, was about to leave. Nobody knew anything about data warehousing or analytics. And my boss back then said, okay, you have it. Right. And I had no idea. I bought with him. I said, I don't want it. I'm not going to take it. I don't know anything about it. And that's how I transitioned into the analytics world, because I decided, okay, I'm going to try it. And it was me by myself. But that made me grow. So, and that's how I ended up in the analytics world.
Robert?
Yeah, I haven't made any mistakes, so I don't really have messages.
And Natalia and I can share a couple of
I'm trying to sort through all of them, but I think one of the most impactful lessons I learned throughout my career in terms of leadership is how important it is to build and maintain a strong team. One of the mistakes I made prior to working at VSP, I had a pretty strong leadership team. I'm really passionate about career development. And I had a couple individuals that were key players who had other opportunities. So they left, and it really weakened the organization. And so it's tricky to strike that balance between letting people go off and achieve their goals and retaining your strong people. And so I've learned that it's real important to understand what your people want, what they want to achieve, and try to position them for that. And try to create opportunities that makes the job interesting for them so that they don't leave. And I feel very fortunate to work with Alan and Natalia. And one of the quotes from JFK that I really appreciate is learning and leadership are indispensable. And what I value about my team is I learn from them every day. And we're a really sharp team, and I try to create a platform for them to grow and continue to blossom. And I think that's super important.
Is that great? Can I answer this too? Can I jump in on the mistakes? So yeah, I think that for me as well, one of the things that I look back early on my career is I really wish I was more collaborative. And I think I got into data science in an early stage, and I call it was kind of this high priestess of data science, right? And, I love teaching. And one of my favorite quotes is to teach is to learn, right? To be a teacher, you are a forever student, right? And I think, as I've grown in my career, I realize everyone that you meet has something you can learn from, right? As Alan was mentioning, maybe I'm not explaining it the right way, but also maybe I can learn something from them too in the way that they approach it. And I wish that I would have talked less and listened more and really looked to understand something from everyone I work. Yes, I know a lot about data science, but what can I learn from this person that I'm encountering, right? And wherever you are, you can grow where you're planted. So I'm obsessed with my flowers every day. I go out, talk to my flowers, see my flowers. I've learned so much from my flowers that it just takes a little bit of water, a little bit of love, and a little bit of sunshine, and things can grow really well. So I think moving forward, more collaboration, more listening, more being a student and learning, and the teaching and all positive progression will come out from there. So all good things. Okay. So Sylvia, I love this. You are saying after listening to all of you, I can really like the culture of the company. Yay, I'm happy that is coming through. Asking if there's opportunities for students at VSP.
Just,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, we have an intern program. So I don't know how many of those positions might still be open, but every year we open a number of intern positions.
And I know after this call, we're going to do a follow-up kind of recap email, and we'll also send out some job opening for everyone. But as we do wrap up today, I'm always, I love being in the future and where things are headed. So selfishly, I have a question for each of you, which is, what are you most excited about at VSP for the future of analytics and AI and for your team? So Alan, you want to kick us off with that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is really these projects that we're running right now to really get to a place where we've truly curated the data and enabled business teams to be much more agile and able to support themselves. And also for our role to shift more into helping them anticipate what their needs are and use data truly strategically, as opposed to this kind of report culture that a lot of companies get stuck in and can't find a way out of. So I think that's a huge opportunity. And then as the technology evolves, I'm actually hopeful that it helps with some of that data curation and helping us even detect and curate the data that we are generating within the organization that we're not tapping into yet.
Natalia?
So I think all the possibilities that we have, all the opportunities we have to enhance that consumer experience, right? So starting from the moment that the consumer enters the doctor's office and the doctor to have data at their fingertips, not to having to fill out those forms all over again. When the doctor places the orders into to VSP, knowing what's available, what's not available, all the way until the consumer it's waiting for the order, knowing where that is and when, how soon and accurately they're going to get it. So I think it's so many opportunities, and it's very exciting with stuff that Alan is implementing. It's we're getting closer together.
Yeah, and I would just echo what Alan said. It's what's exciting to me is the transformation that we're taking the organization through to really shift from this reporting centric culture to really being more analytics driven and empowering the business to augment their decisions with data and analytics. That is really exciting because the possibilities are tremendous, and we're starting to see traction, and that's really exciting.
I love it. And, the work of transformation is not easy. It's definitely hard work to do, but it's so, so vital. I mean, we can see that our environment in the world is changing constantly. And so the work you guys are doing is so key in making sure that VSP is here for another 60 years, 70 years, and can transition to how our economy and environment is changing. So thank you. And thank you for your purpose and mission driven work. This has been a great conversation, and I know everyone here really enjoyed it. So thank you all for your questions. These are amazing questions, which I really appreciate everyone who asked the questions, much better questions than I would have asked. So again, I just want to say a big thank you to Robert, Alan, and Natalia. Again, this is our first session of our Data Horizons event. Tomorrow, we will be talking with the Chief Analytics Officer at PepsiCo, and she will be sharing about AI ethics and the work that they're doing at PepsiCo. And then on Thursday, we'll be diving into AI in public service. And then Friday is AI in financial services. So we hope that you will all join us again there. But most importantly, stay connected. Robert, Alan, Natalia, is it okay if people connect with you on LinkedIn? We know that's everyone's social platform. So just want to make sure that that's okay.
Of course.
Perfect. All right. Well, definitely be sure to connect, and we'll be setting up a follow-up email with this event recording and some job openings as well. Thank you again, everyone, and I hope you have a lovely day.
Thanks,
Thank
Sadie.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.